And so it's all come down to this, the final chapter in Christopher Nolan's game-changing, genre-bending Batman film series. Expectations are sky high, and the film has already been the center of much criticism and controversy. So the question is, does the movie stack up to all the hype? Short answer, The Dark Knight Rises is an epic, sprawling, beautifully crafted film that also happens to kind of be a mess, but I'll get to that in a minute. Let me get the good stuff out of the way first. Christian Bale returns as Bruce Wayne, who since the events of the last movie has become a physically and emotionally crippled Howard Hughes-style recluse, who hasn't been Batman for the last 8 years. Probably more than any other movie before it, Bruce Wayne actually gets more screen time than Batman. This didn't bother me half as much as I thought it would, although I felt the anticipation ran on for a little longer than it probably should have. Probably my favorite thing about the Nolan Batman movies, the thing that I think they really have over almost every other film version that has come before, is the amazing supporting cast. Michael Caine as Alfred shoulders much of the movie's emotional weight, and you would have to be made of stone for his performance not to tug at your heartstrings. His scenes are fewer in this one, but all the more impactful. At the other end of the spectrum, we have Gary Oldman's Commissioner Gordon, who after the last movie has been able to instill a false peace in Gotham using the memory of Harvey Dent. Only he knows it's all based on a lie and it's killing him inside. Gordon has always been really good in these movies, but here he gets his badass card stamped big time. Joining Gordon for this outing is JGL's Officer Blake, an idealistic young cop inspired by Batman to make a difference in Gotham. I felt his character journey was a little heavy-handed and he had more than a few annoying Gary Stu moments, but he had honest charisma, which made him hard to hate, even if his ultimate fate may kind of come off as a little forced. It wouldn't be a Batman story without villains, and Rise gives us a handful to choose from. If you had told me a year ago that I would leave Rise saying Anne Hathaway's Catwoman was my favorite thing, I would call you Arkham insane. But it's true, Selina Kyle, she's never actually called Catwoman in the movie, is great. She's sassy, funny, self-serving, and tough as nails. It was also surprising and very refreshing to see while she had on the form-fitting catsuit, she was never sexualized or fetishized the way the character sometimes is. And then there's Tom Hardy's Bane, probably the man with the hardest job to do filling Heath Ledger's purple clown shoes. Bane is probably the most changed, repurposed, and reimagined from his original comic counterpart, with practically none of the super steroids and Central American stuff that informed his character. But he's a tough and brutal enemy like Batman has never faced before, one who knows all of Pointier's tricks, and he's gonna conquer Gotham through a convoluted plan and a big-ass bomb. I did end up liking him, that's why it's so unfortunate that at the end they undercut him in such a terrible way. In the past, people have said, myself included, that these Nolan movies trade colorful comic book aesthetic in favor for dry realism and cynicism, and while that's still very true, Rise ends up being the most comic booky of the Nolan movies. And I just don't mean the Batwing, and come on, I don't care what you call it, it's the freaking Batwing. But there's quite a few subtle and not so subtle shout-outs to the comics, including an evil tycoon named Daggett, or the fact that we finally have a scene where 3 people in mass talk to one another. The Nolan Batman movies have always been very theme-heavy. Begins was about fear, Dark Knight was about chaos, and Rise, while it's very, very understated, is about hope. The hope that Batman gives to the people and how hope can be poisoned and used to torture someone. People have already begun comparing Rise to Rocky III, with Bruce having to recapture his fighting spirit to combat a new threat. And that works so well in the movie that they end up doing it twice. Once in Gotham and once outside Gotham in an attempt to harken back to Batman Begins. Some people are going to like this, and some people are going to feel like it's a lot of retreaded ground. Rise also asked the audience to make many leaps in logic, and I would be lying if I said there weren't some gaping plot holes in this one. Well, these are all certainly annoying. They didn't break the film, they just made it a much lesser sequel. Another problem Rise has is with the action. Fistfights have always kind of been this series' kryptonite, haha, see what I did there? And while it's gotten much better since Begins, a lot of the same problems still persist. Being shot too close together, too much quick cutting, you know, that sort of thing. The movie's politics also made me raise an eyebrow. Apparently, if you think the rich have more than they need, then you're a dirty communist by this movie's logic. Whether this is as bad as Batman kidnapping a Chinese national or wiretapping an entire city is still up for debate. In the end, I went in wanting to love this movie, and I ended up just really liking it. Begins is still probably my favorite, and I don't think it's better than Dark Knight, but for what it's worth, I liked it, and maybe you will too. Hey, if nothing else, it's a third superhero movie in a series that doesn't suck. This is cause for celebration in my book. And now that that's done, all that's left to do is sit back and wait for people to tell me I'm wrong in the comment section.